Hello friends, today we will be understanding the beak in birds. The beak, also known as the bill or rostrum, is an external anatomical structure of birds which is used for various purposes like probing for food, ingestion of food, killing prey, grooming, manipulating objects, fighting, courtship and feeding young. Beaks can be a combination of strength and sensitivity, strong enough to crack a walnut yet delicate enough to peel a grape. Now let us look at the anatomy of a typical beak of an adult bird. Although beaks vary significantly in size, shape and color, they share a similar underlying structure. Two bony projections, the upper and lower mandibles, are covered with a thin keratinized layer of epidermis known as the rhamphotheca. The upper mandible is supported by a three-pronged bone called the intermaxillary. The upper prong of this bone is embedded into the forehead, while the lower two prongs attach to the sides of the skull. At the base of the upper mandible, a thin sheet of nasal bones is attached to the skull at the nasofrontal hinge, which gives mobility to the upper mandible, allowing it to move upwards and downwards. The outer surface of the beak consists of a thin horny sheath of keratin called the rhamphotheca, which can be subdivided into the rhinotheca of the upper mandible and the gnathotheca of the lower mandible. This covering arises from the Malpighian cells of the bird's epidermis, growing from plates at the base of each mandible. The rhamphotheca grows continuously in most birds, and in some species the color varies seasonally. In some birds such as the puffins, parts of the rhamphotheca are shed each year after the breeding season, while some pelicans shed a part of the bill called a bill horn that develops at in the breeding season. The tomia, which is called tomium when you are talking in singular, are the cutting edges of the two mandibles denoted here by a red line. In most birds, these range from rounded to slightly sharp, but some species have evolved structural modifications which allow them to better handle their typical food sources. Granivorous, that is seed eating birds, for example, have ridges in the tomia which help the bird to slice through the seed's outer hull. Most falcons have a sharp projection along the upper mandible with a corresponding notch on the lower mandible. They use this tooth to fatally sever their prey's vertebrae or to rip insects apart. Some kites, principally those that prey on insects or lizards, also have one or more of these sharp projections, as do the shrikes. Some fish eating species have saw-tooth serrations along their tomia which help them to keep hold of their slippery wriggling prey. The culmen is the dorsal ridge of the upper mandible. Likened by ornithologist Elliott Cuse to the ridge line of a roof, it is the highest middle lengthwise line of the bill and runs from the point where the upper mandible emerges from the forehead's feathers to its tip. The bill's length along the culmen is one of the regular measurements made for ornithological studies. The culmen is measured in a straight line from point to point, ignoring any curve taken with the help of a calipers. Likewise, the conus is the ventral ridge of the upper mandible created by the junction of the bone's two rami or lateral plates. The proximal end of that junction where the two plates separate is known as the gonadial angle or gonadial expansion. The size and shape of the gonadial angle can be useful in identifying between otherwise similar species. The commissure refers to the junction of the upper and lower mandibles, or alternately to the full length apposition of the closed mandibles from the corners of the mouth to the tip of the beak. The nares are two holes, circular, oval or slit-like in shape, which lead to the nasal cavities within the bird's skull and thus to the rest of the respiratory system. In most bird species, the nares are located in the basal third of the upper mandible. They are located at the tip of the beak in kiwis. Some species have no external nares. Cormorants and darters have primitive external nares as nestlings, but these close soon after the birds fledge. Adults of these breathe through their mouths. There is typically a septum made of bone or cartilage that separates the two nares, but in some families including gulls, cranes and the New World vultures, the septum is missing. While the nares are uncovered in most species, they are covered with feathers in a few groups of birds, including grouse and ptarmigans, crows and some woodpeckers. The feathers over a ptarmigan's nostrils help to warm the air it inhales, while those over a woodpecker's nares help to keep wood particles from clogging its nasal passages. A number of species, including the falcons, have a small bony tubercle which projects from their nares. The function of this tubercle is unknown. Some scientists suggest it may act as a baffle, slowing down or diffusing airflow into the nares and thus allowing the bird to continue breathing without damaging its respiratory system during high speed dives. But this theory has not been proved experimentally. Not all species that fly at high speeds have such tubercles, while some species which fly at low speeds do. The nares of some birds are covered by an operculum, a membranous horny or cartilaginous flap. In diving birds, the operculum keeps water out of the nasal cavity. When the birds dive, the impact force of the water closes the operculum. Some species which feed on flowers have opercula to help to keep pollen from clogging the nasal passages, while the opercula of the two species of seed snipe help to keep dust out. In pigeons, the operculum has evolved into a soft, swollen mass that sits at the base of the bill above the nares. Though it is sometimes referred to as the cirri, this is a different structure. Some birds like raptors, owls, skuas, parrots, turkeys and curassows have a waxy structure called a cirri which covers the base of their bill. This structure typically contains the nares except in the owls where the nares are distal to the cirri. Although it is sometimes feathered in parrots, the cirri is typically bare and often brightly colored. In raptors, the cirri is a sexual signal which indicates the quality of a bird. The orangeness of a Montagu's harrier's cirri, for example, correlates to its body mass and physical condition. The color or appearance of the cirri can be used to distinguish between males and females in some species. For example, the male great curassow has a yellow cirri which the female and young males lack. The male budgerigar's cirri is blue while the female's is pinkish or brown. All birds of the family Anatidae, that is ducks, geese and swans, have a nail, which is a plate of hard horny tissue at the tip of the beak. This shield-shaped structure, which sometimes spans the entire width of the beak, is often bent at the tip to form a hook. It serves different purposes depending on the bird's primary food source. Most species use their nails to dig seeds out of mud or vegetation, while diving ducks use theirs to pry mollusks from rocks. There is evidence that the nail may help a bird to grasp things. Species which use the strong grasping motions to secure their food have very wide nails. Certain types of mechanoreceptors, nerve cells that are sensitive to pressure, vibration or touch are located under the nail. Rictal bristles are stiff hair-like feathers that arise around the base of the beak. They are common among insectivorous birds but are also found in some non-insectivorous species. Their function is uncertain, although several possibilities have been proposed. They may function as a net, helping the capture of flying prey, although to date there has been no empirical evidence to support this idea. There is some experimental evidence to suggest that they may prevent particles from striking the eyes if, for example, a prey item is missed or broken apart on contact. They may also help to protect the eyes from particles encountered in flight or from casual contact from vegetation. There is also evidence that the rictal bristles of some species may function tactilely, in a manner similar to that of mammal whiskers or vibrissae. Studies have shown that Herbst corpuscles, mechanoreceptors sensitive to pressure and vibration, are found in association with rictal bristles. They may help with prey detection, with navigation in darkened nest cavities, with the gathering of information during flight or with prey handling. The color of a bird's beak results from the concentrations of pigments, primarily melanins and carotenoids, in the epidermal layers including the Rhampotheca. Eumelanin, which is found in the bare parts of many bird species, is responsible for all shades of grey and black. The denser the deposits of pigment found in the epidermis, the darker the resulting color. Pheomelanin produces tones ranging from gold and rufous to various shades of brown. More than a dozen types of carotenoids are responsible for the coloration of most red, orange and yellow beaks. The hue of the color is determined by the precise mix of red and yellow pigments, while the saturation is determined by the density of the deposited pigments. For example, bright red is created by dense deposits of mostly red pigments, while dull yellow is created by diffuse deposits of mostly yellow pigments. Bright orange is created by dense deposits of both red and yellow pigments in roughly equal concentrations. Beak coloration helps to make displays using those beaks more obvious. Birds are capable of seeing colors in the ultraviolet range. Some species show ultraviolet peaks of reflectance. The intensity and presence of these peaks can depict sexual maturity and fitness of the birds, and it also helps in differentiating conspecifics. For example, king and emperor penguins have a similar plumage, that is feather patterns, but the UV spots on their beaks are situated separately or differently, and that is how they can differentiate between a king and an emperor penguin. In general, the color of the beak depends on a combination of the bird's hormonal state and diet. Colors are typically brightest as the breeding season approaches and palest after breeding. Here is an example of the cattle egret in and after breeding season. The size and shape of the beak can vary across species as well as between them. In some species, the size and proportions of the beak vary between males and females. This allows the sexes to utilize different ecological niches, thereby reducing intraspecific competition. For example, females of nearly all shorebirds have longer bills than males of the same species, and female American avocets, cousins of pied avocets that visit India as seen in the picture, have beaks which are slightly more upturned than those of males. Males of larger gull species have bigger, stouter beaks than those of females of the same species, and immatures can have smaller, more slender beaks than those of adults. Many hornbills show sexual dimorphism in the size and shape of both beaks and casques. Color can also differ between sexes or ages within a species. Typically, such a color difference is due to the presence of androgens. For example, in house sparrows, melanins are produced only in the presence of testosterone. Castrated male house sparrows, like female house sparrows, have brown beaks. The shape and size of the beak is primarily an adaptation for its feeding ecology and the ecological niche that the species occupies. There is variation in the size and shape of the beak accordingly. For example, seed eaters like sparrows, larks and cardinals have short, thick conical bills for cracking seed. Insectivorous birds have a small to medium sized and pointed bill. Birds like crows have a multi-purpose bill that allows them to eat fruits, seeds, insects and other animals. Nectar feeding birds have a curved and slender bill. Woodpeckers have bills that are long and chisel-like for boring into wood to eat insects. Frugivorous birds like hornbill and toucan have a long, slightly curved and large bill. Birds like parrots have sharp curved beaks with the maxilla overlapping the mandible, and it helps in cracking nuts to peeling off the skin of certain fruits. Birds of prey or raptors like hawks, eagles, falcons and owls have sharp curved bills for tearing meat. Scavengers like vultures have bills similar to that of raptors, but have a slightly longer bill to reach the inner parts of the carcasses. Birds like herons, egrets and storks have spear-like bills adapted for fishing. The open-billed stork feeds on freshwater snails and has a slight concavity in the tomia of the beak in accordance with its food. Ducks and geese have a flat bill to either strain through the water in search of plants or other animals and fish. Pelicans have specialized bills for dip netting as their food is primarily fish. Birds like avocets have upturned beaks for scything. Many shorebirds and ibises have long beaks that are curved downwards, which help them in probing for their food in their respective microhabitats. Flamingos have a beak adapted for filter feeding as they feed on planktons and algae in fresh and salt water. Kingfishers have beaks adapted for aerial fishing and capturing prey. Birds like cormorants and darters have beaks adapted for pursuit fishing. Other birds like the crab plover, oystercatcher have beaks modified for their particular food item. Birds like the skimmer skim through the surface of the water and their lower maxilla is longer than the upper. Nevertheless, beaks do have other functions apart from foraging and feeding. Birds may bite or stab with their beaks to defend themselves. Some species use their beaks in displays of various sorts. As part of his courtship, for example, the male Gargani touches his beak to the blue speculum feathers on his wings in a fake preening display, and the male mandarin duck does the same with his orange sail feathers. A number of species use a gapping open beak display to show fear or threat. Some species augment this by hissing or breathing heavily, while others clap their beaks. A number of species, including storks, some owls, frogmouths, and the noisy myna, use bill clapping as a form of communication. Studies have shown that some birds use their beaks to rid themselves of excess heat. The toko toucan, relative of the keel-bealed toucan seen here, which has the largest beak relative to the size of its body of any bird species, is capable of modifying the blood flow to its beak. Measurements of bill sizes of several species of American sparrows found in marshes along the North Atlantic coastline show a strong correlation with summer temperatures. By dumping excess heat through their beaks, they avoid water loss, which is an important benefit in these windy areas where fresh water is scarce. Several ratites, including the common ostrich, the emu, and the southern cassowary, use various bare parts of their bodies, including their beaks, to dissipate as much as 40% of the metabolic heat production. Alternately, studies show that birds living in colder climates have small beaks, lessening heat loss from this structure. During courtship, mated pairs of many bird species touch or clasp each other's bills. Termed billing, this behavior appears to strengthen pair bonding. The amount of contact involved varies among species. Some gently touch only a part of their partner's beak, while others clash their beaks vigorously together. And this hence gave us an idea of the form and function of a bird's beak, and how much is a bird's beak important for its ecological requirements. Now we will study the feet in birds. Birds have two pair of appendages, the forelimbs that are modified into wings and the hind limbs or legs that spring somewhat anteriorly from the trunk in order to balance and support the entire weight of the body at rest. In this photograph, we see a fantastic pose of a peregrine falcon. Each leg typically is made of three parts: thigh, shank and foot. The thigh is usually muscular and short, directed downwards and forwards and closely bound to the trunk so that the knee is not visible. The long and muscular shank extends from the knee downwards and backwards. The actual foot extends to the backward bend in its leg. Hence, the bend is the bird's ankle and not its knee. The foot contains tendons but no muscles and remains covered by horny epidermal scales. Proximal slender part of the foot is called the tarsometatarsus. Distally, it bears 4 long and clawed digits or toes, of which the first or hallux is directed backwards and the remaining 3 forwards usually. The bird's feet and especially their toes come in a variety of shapes and sizes, just as their beaks do, and each foot is well suited to how and where a bird lives. Most birds have 4 toes on each foot and all birds have a claw at the tip of each toe, but different birds have different sized toes and claws and a different arrangement of toes, with some facing forward and some facing backward. Out of the 4 toes, majority of birds have 3 toes facing forward and 1 facing backward. Now, let us look at the types of bird feet depending on the toe arrangement. The first configuration that we will understand is called the anisodactyl, in which the hallux is behind and the other 3 toes are in front, as in perching birds like sparrow, dove, manas, etc. A photograph of a common manna is what we see here. The second configuration is called the syndactyl, in which the third and the fourth toes are united for most of their length and have a broad sole in common, as in the belted and other kingfishers. The one that you see here is a common kingfisher. The third configuration is called the zygodactyl, where the toes are arranged in pairs, the second and third toes in front and the fourth and the hallux behind, as in a woodpecker, and the woodpecker that you see here is the yellow-crowned woodpecker. A heterodactyl configuration is more or less a zygodactyl, except for that the inner toe is actually reversed, and this configuration is only found in trogons. The other configuration is called pamprodactyl, which assumes all the 4 toes to be in the front, but it is highly doubtful that any bird actually uses this configuration. Other configuration is called the raptorial configuration, in which the toes are deeply cleft with large, strong, sharply curved nails, which are also called talons, as in hawks and owls. The photograph here is of a steppe eagle taken in the Little Run of Kutch. The other configuration is called the semi-palmate or half-webbed. The anterior toes are joined part way by a small webbing, as in the semi-palmated plover, cousins of this little ring plover that we see in the photograph. Another configuration is the totipalmate or fully webbed configuration, in which all 4 toes are united by ample webs, as in a cormorant. A palmate or a webbed configuration is the one in which the front toes are united, as in ducks and gulls. We see a comb duck here in the photograph. A lobate or lobed is a swimming foot with a series of lateral lobes on the toes, as in a grib. You see a little grib in the photograph here. In simpler words, the same can be explained with examples we learnt in early stages of our academic life. To start with, the first type can be termed as climbers. The examples are parakeets and woodpeckers, which have 2 toes in front and 2 toes behind for climbing up and down the tree trunks. As we know that parakeets actually nest in cavities on the bark of the trees, and woodpeckers actually get their food from the tree trunk in the form of insects, and hence this configuration helps them to hold on and clasp onto the substratum. The second group of birds that we can understand, and is also a large group of them, are called perchers. Examples being sparrows, manas, doves and many other birds that have 3 toes that face forward and a long hind toe that helps them grip their perches tightly. In the photographs, we see a house sparrow, a red munia, which is a relative of the house sparrow, a Eurasian collared dove, a southern grey shrike clasping onto a twig of acacia, and an Indian pitta. The third group of birds that we consider here are graspers, or in other terms also called raptors, which includes hawks, eagles, owls, vultures and other birds of prey, and have long curved claws called talons that dig into their prey and help them hold on to it in flight. In the photograph here we see a eastern imperial eagle and a peregrine falcon showing how it can actually grasp and dig into its prey's flesh and fly away with it as well, and a mottled wood owl with a distinct talon seen upon the branch of the tree. The fourth group of birds are called scratchers, which includes pheasants, jungle fowl, partridges, quails, and have rake-like toes for scratching the soil. Here we see a grey francolin, a rain quail, a black francolin, and the Indian peafowl, and showing their typical structure of toes and feet. The fifth group is lily trotters, which includes jacanas and moorhens that have feet with very long toes which help them walk with ease on the floating vegetation. The photograph here that you see is of a pheasant-tailed jacana and a purple swamp hen. The runners are bustards and cursors, and that have 3 toes instead of 4, and all their toes point forward for fast running. The first photograph is a great Indian bustard. The next photo is of a lesser florican that migrates and breeds in India, and this is a typical courtship display of a male. The last photo is of an Indian cursor. The next group that we are considering is called waders, which includes herons, storks, egrets, flamingos, etc. These birds have long legs with 3 toes in front and 1 hind toe. Long legs help them wade through shallow water in search of food. The photographs we see here are of a grey heron, an intermediate egret, a yellow bittern, a demoiselle crane, and greater flamingo. All these birds occupy wetlands and aquatic areas. The last group that we consider are called swimmers, which includes ducks, cormorants, and pelicans that have webbed feet, while the coots and grebes that have lobed feet. They use their feet as paddles to wade through water. Photographs here are of a spot-billed duck, a great white pelican, great cormorant. The common coot and the grebes, as we discussed before, have lobed feet, and there is a typical behavior that they can exhibit on the surface of the water, which you see in case of grebes and coots. This is a great crested grebe, and it does something similar on the surface of the water. With this, we studied the form and function of both the beak and the feet in case of birds, and its significance and ecological and biological importance in case of a bird's daily routine.